Hi, and welcome into our React tutorial. React is a front-end framework that makes it much faster and easier to create great, good-looking, perfect front-end applications. Now, it's risen tremendously in popularity over the past couple of years, and it is now used twice as much as the second most used front-end library, which is Angular. So it always comes down to React, Angular, and Vue, and at least it has been for the past 15 years or so. But there was a tendency at one point where more and more of these frameworks just kept on coming out every single year. There's still a bit of that in the front-end world, but React really has a good handle on all of this. So it seems like they're coming out on top. At least they have been for some years, and they will be for some years to come. So if you're gonna start working as a front-end developer or as a full-stack developer with a front-end framework under your belt, React is a pretty good place to start. Now, there are some things that you probably should know before you dive into React. You should probably be familiar with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, because those are the only three languages that a browser understands. So once you write something in React and you create something with React, if you need to figure out what's wrong with it when something goes wrong, and trust me, something will inevitably go wrong, you won't have a fighting chance of figuring out what the problem is if you don't understand those three basic languages. It might be a benefit to know Node.js. You don't need to know all of the ins and outs of Node.js at all. We have a course on it on the channel if you are interested, but React is built on Node.js, so you don't need to know everything about it, but you do need to have it installed, and you need to know just basically what it is and how it works. So what we're going to do in this video is we're going to install everything that we need. We're going to set up a developer environment. We're going to look at some of the things that can make it a bit easier to work with. And then we're going to create our first app. We're going to work with fragments. We're going to introduce stuff like Bootstrap and Awesome that you know from other places, and should probably give you a basis on how to import other tools that you like to work with normally. And then we're going to talk about stuff like conditional rendering, event handling, state management, data props, and function props. We're going to talk about the difference between states and props. And then we're going to connect our app to a backend by both presenting our front-end app from the backend app and then fetching some things from the backend app and out to the front end. And we might even go into something with sockets at the end, so we can get real-time data management. So with all of that, let's just get started. All is Node.js. Now, you can just go to nodejs.org and download it from here. Always choose the recommended one, the LTS, stands for long-term support. That's the version that you want to get with. There might be something later than that, but it's a bit more experimental, and if you want to go into production with it, then you might run into issues later on when you need to update it. So I always recommend the long-term support version. I already have this installed, so I'm not going to go into it. If you want more about the basics of installing Node.js, check out our Node.js video instead, and then come back here afterwards. So the next thing you want to make sure you have is, of course, the Chrome browser. We're going to use the Chrome browser here, and that makes a whole lot of difference what browser you use, but you need to be familiar with the Chrome browser and the Chrome inspector here. And then, of course, you need to have some form of an IDE, and we're going to be using Visual Studio Code in this tutorial right here. But once again, it's okay to use something else. So if we want to set some things up here, so I'm going to go up here into my extensions and say Manage Extensions, and then down here in the bottom of the menu, I can open Chrome Web Store. In here, I'm going to search for React DevTools, and I'm going to install this one. It's featured right here. Add it to Chrome, add extension, and it's checking. There we go. Now, what this does is that when I open my inspector here, I have a new tab up here called React DevTools. It's probably only visible when we start working with it, actually. But that's the point of it. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to open up our development tool, and we are going to go down here into our extensions, and we're going to find one that's called Prettier. And we're going to, let's see, here. Yeah, this one. And we're going to install that one. There we go. And I think that's pretty much the tools that we need. So now let's open Node.js and create our first app. I have a folder open here in my workspace. So if I take this React folder, I just created it, it's empty, and I just drag it in here. I don't want to save that configuration or anything, but now I have it open here. I have my folder here. There's nothing in it, but I have that folder. I can right click on that folder and say new terminal add folder, and I'll get that new terminal right here. And now that I'm inside this folder, I can just write npm create vite add latest. And it's asking me to install Vite in order to do that. And I'll say yes. There's a bunch of errors with that because I need to do this as an admin. So sudo superuser do, and then my password. There we go. And yes, I'd like to install this stuff. Project name, Vite project. Let's call it React tutorial. And of course I can use my arrows here and select whatever it is I want, and I'll say React, and I'll want to do that using TypeScript. And so now I actually have this folder that showed up here in my IDE called React tutorial with a bunch of things inside of it. Another tool instead of Vite, because Vite is not actually the official way of creating a React app. So you might see someone saying that you should use CRA, but that's generally not true anymore. There is this whole pull request, open comment section thing on GitHub, the official GitHub for React, with a thread here talking about how exactly we get around the problems that exist around the old way of creating apps with CRA, and the fact that everyone's using Vite instead because it's so much faster and works much better when you're developing with it. So we can go through all of these things, but the idea is that they try to sum it up by saying what they see as the future of React, and they want to turn this CRA create React app into a launcher instead of something that makes an application. And so that's something they want to do in order to give the people what they want while not breaking backwards compatibility. So that's their proposal, option 5. And you can look into that more if you want to, but it's just to warn you that if you're looking into CRA, you're probably looking into a way that's about to be deprecated. So use Vite instead, like I showed you here. Now this is the folder that has our React app in it. So if we right click on that and say open an integrated terminal, we can say npm install, just in order to get Vite in here and running. Now, once again, I have to do that as a super user. So npm install. And it's going to install everything that it needs in order to run this application. And after it's done that, I can say npm run dev. I suppose I have to do that as a super user as well. And that gives me a link right here, and I can click on that link, copy it, open up Chrome, paste it in here, and ladies and gentlemen, you can see your first React app running right here. So let's take a look at what it is that we have in here, because this is all the code that's been generated for us, that's been scaffolded for us. And the first thing we have up here is our node module. So these are all the things that are already important and a part of our application. But this is the things that come from the outside, so we don't really need to worry too much about that. Our public folder contains anything that can be loaded from the browser. So once our HTML starts pulling resources like CSS, images, whatever it might be, those public files should be here in the public folder. And then here in the source is where we have the actual application. So this is where we'll primarily be working when we're working with this with React. You'll see the file extension TSX a lot of times. It stands for TypeScript, and then X just for showing that this is a React file, not just a TypeScript file. And then we have some general things down here like a git ignore. We have an index.html. If we take a look at that, then we can see that this is a very basic HTML template, but it does have two important things in it. One of them is that it has this div element with the ID root, which is actually the one that's going to be replaced with our React app. So everything else here around it works as kind of a template around it. And then we have this script afterwards, which is the main TypeScript from our source folder that's going to have the code in it that actually replaces this. So that's why we load our JavaScript as the last file after the rest of the DOM has been loaded, so we can replace something in it. And that's what we do with the actual app up here, or with main TSX. So if we take a look at that, then you can see that it has a bit of code here, and we'll get into more of how all of that works. This might seem a little bit overwhelming, but we'll just delete it all and start from scratch. Now in our Node.js tutorial, and we're not going to use the whole server from that, but in that, we worked with tweets and with Twitter as an example. So I want to create a new file here called .tsx. Now, I have a problem here, and I just want to show you how to solve it, because it actually won't create that file right now, and it seems like that's a common issue. So what I do is I'll write sudo chown -r, and then my username and a path, right? So my username, you can actually see it right here, is my name. And then the path is going to be the path that I'm already at. So that's going to be this path right here, I believe. So I'll add that to it, and I'll hit enter. I'll have to enter my password. And let's see, no such file directory. I can go up here into my folder, and I can say copy path, and I can use that. I'll hit arrow up, and I'll replace the app with whatever's in my clipboard. There we go. That seemed to work a little bit better. And so I suppose now I should be able to create this file, tweet.tsx. There we go. It placed it in the wrong folder, but I can add it up here into the source folder, and now I have this tweet file. Now, what I really wanted to do was that I wanted to create a new component. And I do that by writing function tweet, and I'm just using completely normal JavaScript notation. Now, I have a GitHub Autopilot on, so it's always suggesting a bunch of things for me. This is way more than I really want. I actually just wanted to say return a div that says hi mom. Now, this might look a little bit weird, but what this really is this is a JSX syntax. So JavaScript XML. So this allows us to actually write a valid XML or HTML as text directly in our JavaScript. Also note that I'm using a capital first letter or Pascal casing. If I wanted to use multiple words, I would have to capitalize each word. But this is a tweet, and that's all that I want it to be. I just wanted to return this. So this is actually the simplest form of a valid React component. Now, in order to use this component, we need to export it. So export default tweet. There we go. And I'll hit save, and then I'll go over into app.tsx, and I'll just delete everything because we don't really need that much. We can just say function app. There needs to be one of those. That's like your Java main method or something. It's the first thing that's going to look, first place that it's going to look, and that's where it's going to start the application from. And I'll just say return div, and inside that div, I'll want to have an element, and that element should be a tweet. There we go. Now, this is actually valid enough to say start and stop. It's just not going to accept it because I need to import it. So import tweet from /tweet, and / means the same folder that I'm already in. And then the next thing that I need to do is I need to also export default app right here. So this should be enough, and this should be valid. But since I'm not adding anything into this element, I might as well just use a single element closing it. So that's what I'm doing here. So once I hit save, this should all be great, and I should be able to see my own app now in Chrome. Obviously, I need to restart the server. So I'll go down here into the terminal and npm run dev. There we go. Hit refresh, and it says hi mom. Now, the code that we're using right now says div, and then it has a tweet in it, and then that tweet inside of that there's this div that says hi mom. So let's take a look at what this looks like inside the Chrome inspector. Here we have the div root. That's the one that we saw in our template down here, index.html. That's what we have here. And down here we have the script that's being imported, right? But inside this div, we now have the div here that comes from the app right here. So that's this div right here. And inside of that, we have a div that says hi mom, and that comes from the tweet. So that's this one. And that's the basic idea or a way of working with modules, because you can see that everything just becomes simpler, and you can put modules inside of modules and keep on expanding your DOM that way and end up with a really simple syntax here that just says what exactly it is that we want. Now, if I go into my tweet here, normally a tweet would consist of a little bit more than just a text, right? I mean, when I want to show it on the screen, I wanted to show the name of whoever tweeted it. I wanted to show maybe the timestamp for whenever it was created. Then, of course, the tweet itself, and then maybe some buttons to like it or retweet or something like that. So if I'm going to go in here and say, I want to tweet a header that says, let's say that our tweet says at header level 4. So I want to have a header that says Henrik. Actually, let's say name : Henrik, just so we can remember what this is. Then we have a div that says timestamp : April 1st, because it's an April Fool, right? And then we have the actual tweet here in its own div. And then we have a button with a like. Now, we have all these red squiggly lines here, and that's because we're using TypeScript, and by using TypeScript, it's going to warn us when we write something that's not syntactically accurate. And this isn't, because we're not actually allowed to return multiple different elements. What we are allowed to do, however, is we can create one element with multiple elements inside it. So it would be okay to just say that this is a div. So do that. But what we can also do is, and actually I think for the HTML structure, this would be the correct thing to do. But what I want to show you here is you can use something called a fragment, which means that you can actually write empty elements like this. That's called a fragment in React. And that just is something that allows us to still return multiple elements. So if I save this and I jump over into our server and I hit refresh, and I don't have anything to show for it. Now this is not going to do anything, and you can see here that the text is turning red over here, and we get an error message saying that tweet cannot be used as a JSX component. Its return type void is not a valid JSX element, and that's because when we're using a fragment like this, we need to encapsulate it inside of a parenthesis like this. So if we save it like that, and then we go over here, then we can see that our text shows up. Now, one more thing I want to say about fragments is that you can actually import fragment from React, and then you can write the word fragment in here. That gives you the exact same thing, but it's just not really necessary. So I'm not doing it right now, but that is how it works. It's just a shortcut to doing it with these empty elements. And now let's try using some Bootstrap in here. So I'll jump over here, Bootstrap, and I'll want to get a card component. So docs card, down here, and a card is something that looks like this. You don't have to have an image up top, so you can just make something more empty like this, or something that has a title. You can make it look in a bunch of different ways, but I want a card like this for my tweets, and then I want one of their buttons in there as well. So how do we do that? Well, obviously they have a bit of code here that you can use, and I think I'll just take this one. Looks a bit like what I want. This is going to be the person tweeting it, and then this is going to be the date, this is going to be the actual tweet, and this is going to be the like button, and this might be a dislike button or whatever. So I'll just copy this code, or click here to copy it, and then I'll jump over into Visual Studio Code right here, and I'll just say that this is going to be a tweet from now on. So here we go. Let me just take a look how it looked. Yes, that is the proper indentation. And it's still in the fragment. So what I want to do up here is, as the card title, I want it to have the name right there. There we go. And then I wanted the timestamp to be the card subtitle. And then I wanted the tweet to say, "Hi mom." And then I wanted the button to say like, and the other one to say dislike. There we go. So I can just delete these now. And if I take a look here at my example page, which by the way still says Vite plus React and TypeScript, that's all great. But we can change that down here in the index file. That's the title right here. It'll just be skill session React tutorial. But we had a problem here, and the problem is that we're using stuff like style and class, and that's actually not really something we can do. We need to write something else, because these are keywords in HTML. So we need to write something like a class name. So I'll just add that right here, these 4 letters, copy, and then paste, paste, and paste. And for style up here, I don't think we actually need that right now. So hit save, and now we have something here, but it doesn't quite look like the Bootstrap stuff that we have had up here. So I'll go back over into Visual Studio Code and go down here into my terminal, and I'll write and I'll hit the Control-C to stop the server, and then I'll say npm install bootstrap. And I might need to do that as a super user. Yep, sudo npm install bootstrap. There we go. And oh, actually, I forgot to say class name on those two as well. So I still have one error that's up there. Cool, no errors. Let's jump over into the browser, have a look. Yeah, no servers running. I'll hit the arrow. I'll go down here into the terminal, hit arrow up twice, 3 times, npm run dev. And we're running again on the same port. So now it should look a bit more accurate. And the reason is that we need to go into our main.tsx. See, we're importing all of this random stuff here, this index.css file. Well, it might be nice to have later on, but it doesn't actually need any of all this stuff. And neither does the app CSS for that matter. But we do need to import Bootstrap. Import Bootstrap. Come on. There we go. This CSS bootstrap.min.css. And .min just means that this is the minified version. So that's going to be a little bit faster to load than the non-minified version. But I can just remove that if I want it to be easier to read. So I'll hit save and I'll go over here and I can see that things are terrible. So it failed to resolve this import. So what is the issue? Does it not have the minified version? Maybe it doesn't. It didn't. That's not the actual problem. Let's see. Bootstrap, dist CSS, Bootstrap. Bootstrap, dist CSS. Yeah, there's nothing in here called yeah, there it is, bootstrap.css. Should be possible to import this. And by the way, bootstrap.min.css is here as well. So that's a bit odd. Copy relative path main.tsx. Import. This really shouldn't be an issue. There it is. I have no idea what was wrong the first time around, but this seems to work. And you can see now how I checked if the path was accurate by just opening it up in here in the node modules. Now it's a bit boring to just have one tweet, right? We need to be able to change these things in here to say that the name should be an actual name. We want to change the tweet to be an actual tweet. And we want the timestamp to be an actual timestamp. And in order to do all of that, we need to make sure that our tweet can actually take some form of data. So let's say up here that it takes data that's called a tweet. And then down here we can say that that tweet is what we get the name from. Tweet.name. Tweet.tweet. And tweet.timestamp. So that means that we need some kind of a data type that supports all of this. So we can go up here and say that we have a type tweet that has an ID, number, name, it's a string, timestamp that's a string, and a tweet that's a string. And of course we need to end that. So now we can actually do something with this, but we want to create a list of these. So let's go ahead and and instantiate some of these. So const tweets, tweet list equals, that's going to be an array, yes. So ID1, name ed, timestamp could look like this, and the tweet could be hello world. And let's just add another tweet to it. ID2, name ed, timestamp, and tweet hello world. And let's just do a third just so it's a proper list, right? And we can change these a bit so they're a bit more different. So this could be John Smith, and this could be Jane Doe, and this could be Bob Smith. That's cool. We can just give them some different months here, and then it could be hello world, hello mom, and hello dad. Great, so we have some objects now to work with. We have our tweet list. Then we have the actual tweet function here. And let's see, binding element tweet implicitly has type any. Yeah. So let's go down here and say that we have another function, tweet list. And this tweet list is going to map all of the tweets in the tweet list that we just created and call each of them tweet, and then it's going to create a new tweet with each of them, and the key is going to be the tweet ID. And up here, we need to write that the tweet is of type tweet. There we go. I think we have an extra parenthesis. But I still have an issue over here in my app because I'm still working with this as if it was just a tweet. And I think the right approach here would just be to rename everything to say that we're not actually trying to import a tweet. We are trying to import a tweet list. So let's just rename this one. Yes, fix the imports. So now we're importing from tweet list, but we are actually importing a tweet list. We want to create a tweet list. And when we go back in here, what we want to export is our tweet list. There we go. And now all of these errors have vanished, and we should be able to jump over into our browser and see our list. Now there's a bit of an error here. No, I just had to refresh. So now we can see that it says hello world, hello mom, hello dad, and they come from John Smith, from Jane Doe, and from Bob Smith. So we're actually creating different tweets. So the next thing that I want to do is I want to take this tweet list here, and I want to take it out and put it into a JSON file because it doesn't really belong here. And at some point we want to get it from a server instead, right? Now, luckily this notation is already JSON because JSON is JavaScript object notation. Only difference here is that we're using an interface for it, and interfaces is not generally a thing that we have in JavaScript, but we do in TypeScript. So that's one of the differences that we have here. So I'm just hitting Command X. We still need a tweet list. And we can say that this is of type tweet. Once again, TypeScript allows us to do that. And then just make it as an empty array. Then we can make a function that, and we can make that asynchronous just for good measure. Function load tweets. Let's see what it comes up with here. Fetch. Yeah, right now it's trying to fetch from a local host. We're not quite there yet. I want to do it from a local file. And what else do we have? We have constant our tweets, which is awaiting response from the JSON. That's fine. Then we want our tweet list to, well, it should actually just be able to have all the data in it. So it should just be equal to tweets. Oh, we can't assign it because it's a constant. So let's just turn it into a let. There we go. And Now we should be able to load this file as soon as we call it tweets.json. There we go. So I'll hit save. I'll create a new file, tweets.json, and then we'll add it in here. Let's see what the issue is. There shouldn't be a comma after the last one here. What else is wrong? Oh, everything needs to be double quoted. And it can't fix that. I'll fix that off camera. So everything is now in double quotation marks, and this tweets.json file needs to be in our public folder. Otherwise we cannot reach it once we start the application. So move it up there. That's fine. And back here in our tweet list, that's also where we actually read it from. That's the primary directory. Now we could say console.log these tweets just to make sure that we can see what's happening in the console. And let's jump on over into the browser and see what's going on. So right now we have an empty list, but if we refresh, nothing's happening. That's great. That's because we never actually called this function. So let's just say load tweets. There we go. And jump on over here. So now this works, but it might work inconsistently. See, I refreshed and now the tweets disappeared. If I keep on refreshing, then at some point they might reappear or they might not. And the whole problem is that we are using this fetch, which is asynchronous. So this is an asynchronous function and it's waiting for certain things, but the function down here just loads straight away. It's not waiting for it. So what we need to do is we need to work with the states. So what we're doing is we're going to import useState and useEffect from React so we can fix some of this. Then we're going to take all of this stuff right here and we're going to move it into the tweet list function, because that's where we need to do something. Then we're going to set some constants here. Constants tweet list and set tweet list. Use state tweet. Yep. That replaces this, of course. And then we're gonna say use effect. Inside of that, we can create an anonymous function. And this is not exactly what I want. So let's see. In here, what I want is, I still want that async function. Load tweets, and I still want to have to fetch my tweets. I still want my data as a response, and I still want to. This is not completely accurate. So set tweet list, that's actually fine, and then we're still logging them to the console, but there's no function here to call anymore. So I want to do this for the whole array, and while this is happening, I want to say if tweet list.length is 0, then I want to return that it's loading. And otherwise I want to do this. So what I always did. So right now it says loading, and that's great actually. But it still has some issues. Because I'm never actually calling this function that I have right here. So before I end my async call or my anonymous function, I need to say load tweets. Let's jump over into the browser, and yep, Now we have our tweets, and no matter how many times we load, we get them here. Now we are getting it a bunch of times over here, and this looks a bit like a Stack Overflow. And the problem here is that I have misplaced this parenthesis. This was supposed to go over here. So if we just set it like this, we can clean the code up a little bit to get a better overview of it. And hit save and jump over into the browser. And if we hit refresh, then we can see that it doesn't keep loading everything all the time anymore. Now, useState is a built-in hook that allows you to add to your functionality of your components by taking the initial state and the function that's going to change that state. So that's what we're doing here. We're taking the initial state and then the function that's going to change it. And then we have useEffect, which is another built-in hook that allows you to perform side effects in your components. So this is taking a callback function as its argument, which is executed after every render of the component. You can also provide a dependency array as a second argument to useEffect, which would specify the values that the effect depends on. And that's what we're doing down here. So useEffect depends on useState, and that's what we're importing up here. Work a little bit more with state, but before we do that, let's clean up our code just a little bit. We have this card right here, and we want to use a card header as well. And inside this card header, I want to place the name of the person who tweeted and the date. And then I want to use some proper Bootstrap rows and columns. So div class name equals row. And div class name equals column. And I'll move this one down here, and then we have a little bit of syntax fixing. We don't need to use a fragment anymore. There we go. So that should all look correct. And down here in index.html, I've added a container around everything, just to make sure that we're using the proper Bootstrap grid system. So now if we go over here, we can see that we have a bit of spacing here in between, and we can see if we inspect these elements that we have our app with inside of the container, and we have rows and columns here. So that's great. Then what I want to do is jump into the CSS and make a couple of changes there. So for instance, I want to say that the row, that's a class name, needs a margin on top and bottom. Let's do it like this. There we go. And let's see what's going on here. We had the row your boat. And yeah, that's just me. I had it in the other way. The opposite way of what I wanted. This is what I wanted. There we go. So now that I have a bit of space in between, the next thing I want to do is I want to say that if the row is active, I want to be able to click one and then see that this is the one I clicked, that this is the one that I'm working with. So I'll say that's going to be a card that is active. And inside that, it has that head section, right? So card header. So the card header inside of a card that is active should have the background color blue and the color, so that's going to be the text color, white. So nothing's happening right now, but it should be so that if I inspect this one and I add active here, nothing actually happens. Let's see. If I go into the tweet list and I just add active to the card here, then they all turn blue. Oh, I added it to the header, sorry. So it's not supposed to be here, it's supposed to be up here. And if I remove it from one of them, then it's no longer blue. So that's going to be how we can tell that it's active. So what I want to do is make sure that this active is only present when I clicked on something. So I can only have one that's active at a time. So what I will do is right here, I can say that it's either going to be this or this, right? So class name, let's just make things a bit more easy to read. So class name equals, and then a function here. And we'll make this depend then to say that active index equals ID. That's not what I said. ID, if that's true, this is a ternary operator. Sorry, I hit the keyboard key. And else card tweet. There we go. So active index equals ID. Now it has a problem here. The ID should come from the tweet, but there's no such thing as an active index. So let's create that, and I'll use this use state once again that we imported up here. So I'll say let active index, set active index, and use state number 0. That's fine. And then I'm gonna need to add an onClick function as well down here. So I'll say that the key equals the tweet ID, and onClick set active index to tweet ID. Now, in order for this to work, this let first of all needs to be a constant if it's supposed to store state, and then it needs to be inside this function if that's where it's going to be used. Now, I don't need these curly brackets right here actually. And so if we save this and jump back into the browser, we should be able to hit refresh and then click each one here and they'll each get selected, but we only want one of them to be selected at a time. And in order to achieve that, we need to move the logic down to the list rather than to the single tweet, because the single tweet cannot make a decision like this. It cannot remove that state from another tweet. So if we go down here into our tweet, we're sending a couple of parameters with it. We have the key and the actual tweet. We can add something to this. We can set is active equals to tweet ID. So it's going to be true when the tweet ID is the active index, otherwise it's going to be false. And then on click, we want something to happen. We want to set the active index to the tweet ID. This, of course, can only happen when we have the active index moved down here as well. So let's take that with us. So we have two states down here now, and now it's only this is active. That's an actual problem. But this is also because right now we're just mapping the tweet. We're not mapping the index. We have to. So this is active needs to be taken by the actual tweet up here. So the tweet needs to take the tweet itself, whether it is active, and an onClick function. And the types here are going to be of tweet is active, is going to be Boolean, and onClick is going to be a function that returns void. So if we save this, then of course we need to go down here and say that instead of this, it's just whether it's active. So there we go. And then onClick, we just use the onClick method. There we go. So let's see if we remembered everything. I'll hit refresh and let's go. Now we can select one of these and it'll deselect the others. So this is another way to work with state in React. Now, right now I'm loading all of my data from a simple JSON file, and that won't do. In our Node.js tutorial, we worked with tweets as well, but we created this whole back and forth where our frontend is presented by our backend, because the problem is our frontend cannot load anything asynchronously through a browser from a website that it wasn't presented from. So even if I'm just running my Node.js app on one port and my React app, which is also a Node.js app, yeah. But if I'm running my React app on a different port in my browser, I won't be allowed to use my React app to call my Node.js app. So I'll have to present my React app from my Node.js app. And in order to do that, I'll take my workspace here. I have this React folder that I'm working in right now, but I have this Node.js folder, which is the project that we built in the Node.js tutorial. So I'll add this to my workspace here. I don't think that's what I actually did right now. Let's try that again. Add folder to workspace. Yep. So now we have two folders in here, right? We have our Node.js app and we have our React app. Now, when we had the Node.js tutorial, we could right click on this one, say open an integrated terminal, and we could say nodemon app/index.js, and we could jump over into the browser, open a new tab, and go to localhost 3000. And this all works, but we have a problem. We cannot reach our React app from here, because if we try to back up out of the app, out of the folder that we started the server from, we're gonna get some access errors. So what we need to do is hit Control-C to stop the server, say cd space ... You don't need the space if you're on Windows. And then from here, from the workspace folder that contains both of these folders, I can start my my Node.js app. So I'll say nodemon, and then I'll say Node.js /app/index.js. But this is going to yield a couple of problems. If I refresh now, you can see that there's some whole problematic things going on. So let me just tell you how to fix these things so we can move ahead. First of all, this is a bit too hard coded. So what we need to do is to say path.join and call that as a method this, and then you just take each step of your path as a parameter. So if we do this now, we can jump over here and we should actually be able to get something. No such file at Node.js/app/public. No, of course not, because there is no, the public folder is not inside the app folder. So we actually need to take a step back. So refresh. So now we're getting something. We're getting the pure HTML, but if we inspect here, we can see that we're not getting the frontend.js file. So we're not getting the JavaScript. So let's take a look here inside the public index.html. Here we're trying to load the JS, but once again, this is a path. We couldn't access this from the browser either if we wanted to. We cannot just write frontend.js. So why would it work from the HTML, right? So what we can do is, I would actually propose that we just simply remove this and write /frontend. And then we go into the app and into the index.js, and then we just add another path for it to say this is a file that we want to actually serve. So /frontend, that's going to be the frontend.js file. Here we go, and into the browser, refresh, and now we have everything. Now the front end is working again. So, but we're really just back to square one. We're back to where we were when we ended the Node.js tutorial. What we want to do is use the React front end instead, right? Now, in order to load my React app from here, I need to change something, because Vite is not creating a distribution folder by default. It's just keeping the app in memory. So what we need to do is we need to go into this vite.config.ts, and we need to write module.exports. Let's just use that one. And plugins. No, not plugins. Build : out dear : let's call it dist, just to keep it. That's the naming conventions you would know from Java, right? So what this means is that we want to actually have our files built in the directory. We want to output it into the directory called dist. Now, right now, we're getting an exception here, or we're getting an error that we cannot find the name module. So in order to fix that, let's go up here where we're running Vite from, and say Control C to stop the server, and then say npm install save dev at types/node. And of course, we need to do this as a super user. So super user do sudo. There we go. And now that we've done that, you can see this error goes away, and we can go up and run dev once again. So we still have it running if we want to. Now, the next thing we want to do is we want to go into our package.json inside of our React package.json, and we want to find scripts here, and we want to add build. It actually has TSC and Vite build. So we should be able to go down here, Control C, and say npm run build. And now that that is run, our distribution folder exists up here. So now it's translated all of our TypeScript into JavaScript, and everything is great. It works, and it's placed right here. So now we can just present this HTML file right here instead from our Node application. So React tutorial dist index.html. So React and it was dist, and it was React tutorial, right? So React tutorial dist index.html. So that's what we want to present now in our primary path. So let's go in here and load. It doesn't work right out of the box, but that's actually because it cannot find this front-end file. It cannot find the JavaScript file. And we just fixed that a moment ago. And we fixed it by doing this, but this only presents a single file. We want to make the whole assets folder available publicly, right? So what we're going to do is we are going to say app.use/assets. And here we want to say express static path join. Yep. Dear name, public, assets. This is not the complete accurate folder, but we can find the accurate folder by copying the path that we just set up for the React app. So we'll just do this and say that we're still in dist, but we need to go one step further into assets. There we go. So we should be presenting all of this right now, and we should be able to get into that folder now if we jump over into the browser. So now it's saying that it cannot get this. And that is, of course, because when we load it, we don't need this index.html, the trouble of copy pasting. So now when we go into this path, we actually get it. And that should also mean that we can now go in here and it says loading. So it's actually trying to get something from the React app. Remember, this is our Node.js app running, and the loading and 3 dots that came from our React tutorial here inside of the tweet list, where it says loading until the tweets are actually loaded asynchronously. So far, so good. And if we look in the browser here, we can see that the problem is that it cannot find this vite.svg and it cannot find tweets.json. And these are, of course, the files that are here in the public folder, but we need to look up here in the distribution folder where we can see that these files are not placed under assets. They're actually placed directly within the distribution folder. So we can either choose to grant access to the whole distribution folder, or we can choose to just create access to this index folder. So I think we should actually just grant access to the whole distribution folder, because that is all that we need. And instead of writing a bunch of code, let's just do that. So Node.js, index.js, we can just say that this empty bracket right here should not point to assets or anything. It should just point directly to the distribution folder. And as you can see now, we're actually presenting our React app from our Node.js app, which should also mean that we should be able to now get the tweets from our Node.js app instead of from this static JSON file. So what I can do now is I can jump down into my React file, and of course I'm not gonna mess inside the distribution files. They're just gonna be created for me whenever I type the build command. So what I want to do is go into the tweet list here where I'm loading the JSON file. So let me just find that. Here we are, tweets.json. That's actually not what I want to fetch. What I want to fetch is /tweets, right? So I'll add that in here, hit save, go down in here into my React server, or into my React folder, and run npm build. And the problem here is that this is actually 2 different syntaxes for writing the exact same thing. That's a mistake on my part. So if we just move this up here, delete what we have down here, and hit save, we should be able to go down here and say npm run build. And it builds the way it's supposed to. And now when we jump into the browser and we go back to our page here, we should be able to get our actual tweets. So let's see here. It has built the files. So if we go into the distribution folder, there's a tweets.json file still, and this is still what's being loaded for some reason. It shouldn't be, because didn't we just change that in our React tutorial? Not distribution file, but down here in our tweet list. Oh, it's actually not changed, my bad. So we just wanted /tweets, not JSON or anything. Hit save, npm run build, and jump over into this file. And now you can see, now we have the name, timestamp, and we actually get this these tweets from our database. Right now it's having a difficult time with the state and which one we clicked, but that's because we don't have the actual proper data structure for these. We have tweet ID instead of ID, and we have user ID and all these things. So the data formats are not completely accurate, but we do have a list of tweets, and we do have tweets. So these are the tweets from the database that are coming out and being put into our React app. Now there's still a lot of things that we could do here. We could fix the data types so that a tweet in the backend and the frontend is the same. Otherwise, we might get some issues. We could make it so that we could post tweets from our React frontend by creating a new React component for that. We could introduce sockets.io, but this tutorial is growing very, very long. So let's see if we have time to do a follow-up at a later point. But until then, I hope this gave you enough of an introduction to how to work with React, that you can see both how React works and how to work with it, but also how to get from that vanilla HTML, CSS, and JavaScript and into a framework like React. And I also hope you can see the benefits of working with something like this and how it can make it easier to get an overview of your application, instead of having all of your HTML just parsed into a single file, that you can actually build up your DOM and then express it more thoroughly inside of your components. And without doing something like Razor pages or normal PHP scripts where you just mash your front end and your back end together. This should give you a good idea of how to separate your back end from your front end. So with all that out of the way, thank you for being here, and I'll see you next time.